Thanks for tuning in to the Billionaire Belief Show. I am your host, the one and only Dane, and I want to thank you for tuning in. On today's episode, we will be discussing the three core elements of billionaire belief. So let's get right to it right now. Three core elements of billionaire belief. Like, what am I talking about? What is he saying? Who is this guy? That might be some of the questions on your mind at this point in time. So let me answer them for you. Who am I? I'm just the guy who had an idea and was relentless about figuring it out. I had a question, I should say, and I was relentless about figuring it out. What was that question? Well, I vividly recall being a child growing up in the American school system, and even though I had the same conditioning and experiences as most other people in the world, well, in America, even at a young age, I recall myself having visions of myself living a life outside of the system. At that young age, I could see, and I'm talking about like middle school, like elementary, middle school, high school. I remember being the kid who, when asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I want to be like my grandfather. And as I got older, what I learned entrepreneur, then I learned real estate investor. So I wanted to be like my grandfather, a real estate investor, an entrepreneur, businessman. I didn't want to be a worker at a corporation. However, because I was still a young bull, I didn't know what I didn't know what I didn't know. I had a vision, but I didn't have a clear path to turn my vision into a reality. So, like everybody else in America that comes up in this educational system, I too got distracted by it. In that, I vividly remember going to college and not knowing what major I wanted to major in. So I just stuck with business because that was just an interest of mine. That had always been an interest of mine, going back to wanting to be like my grandfather. And so that's what I did. I really didn't take college seriously in that regards because I still felt confident and sure that I needed to be doing something bigger and better than just being a worker. I vividly remember graduating from college and kind of like, trying to do the whole good job thing. And that experience just showed me that the corporate playground wasn't the environment for me as a worker, I would say. And so I vividly remember telling some of my frat brothers at the time that, like this ain't for me. I'm gonna have to go figure it out on my own. Because it wasn't that working, I had a problem with working, nor did I have a problem working a 9 to 5 or being an employee. I just understood that I had a vision of achieving big and great things in my life. I understood I didn't have a clear path to make it happen. So going back to college, being in college, I thought that me studying business, something that I was interested in, would at least give me some sort of education to help me turn my visions into a reality. But unfortunately, that never happened. And as I got older and began to learn and really get immersed into this thing called, America, once I started learning on my own, once I started taking self education more seriously, in a sense, I had abandoned formal education and instead focused on informal education, so self education. I was just at the time, and this is like I said, maybe when I graduated from college, so 2007. I would say from 2007 up until 2020, like it was me trying to figure this out. Because the question I had on my mind was, all right, you want to be, a successful entrepreneur. You want to be a profitable entrepreneur. You want to be a businessman. You want to work for yourself. You want to do that's the road, that's the path you want to go down. Now I understood that. All right, well, I went to high school, I went to college, and neither one of those platforms gave me the path or the knowledge or the education that I felt confident that I needed in order to turn my vision of being a successful entrepreneur into a reality. I realized that going to get an MBA wasn't going to help me achieve it either, because when I was in the process of about to go get an MBA, I remember speaking to some gentlemen who were actually in an MBA program at where were they going to school? I think they were either at USC or UCLA. But I just remember me expressing my vision, and them just being like, "Nah, well, you don't want to be an MBA because an MBA is just is not going to help you achieve the goal you want to become, because that's not what you're going to be getting taught." You know what I mean? Our current American educational system, isn't going to educate people or American citizens to be entrepreneurs, because that's not what the system is designed to do. The system is designed to create workers for the industrial revolution, but we're no longer in the industrial revolution. But that is still what our curriculum is designed around, to produce a workforce for the industrial revolution. And so like I said, I'm a young whippersnapper at this time, but these are some of the things going through my mind. And so what I ultimately came to realize was here was my train of thought. I said to myself, I was like, well, bro, if I was when I was a student in school and I was struggling to get good grades, what did I do? Well, I started to pay attention to what the students who were getting the grades that I wanted, so A's and B's. I started looking at what they were doing. Then I imitated what they were doing, and then after doing that to the best of my abilities, I eventually was able to start getting A's and B's. So I said, okay, what if I applied this same logic to entrepreneurship? So then I said, okay, well, who would be considered the A students of entrepreneurship? Then the A students of entrepreneurship to me were billionaires. So okay, now my next train of thought was, what is it that billionaires believe? Like, what's in the billionaire belief that allows them to produce the outcome of being a successful entrepreneur, an A student at entrepreneurship? Like, what are the elements of that? Like, that's what I knew that I didn't know at that point in my life. And so that's why I began my journey of and that's where my journey of self education began, in understanding what are the core elements of billionaire belief, so that I understood how billionaires thought. And by understanding how billionaires thought, if I just emulated and imitated that to the best of my abilities, that would increase the probability of me achieving success on the levels that they achieve success. Now, that wasn't necessarily to be a billionaire per se, but it was to be a high performer. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I understood. With that in mind, I started just going to YouTube U and just studying, going in and typing like wealthy habits. How do rich people think? How do wealthy people think? Like, what are billionaire beliefs? What are millionaire? So that's literally what I started studying on a day to day basis. At the time, I was working at a corporate job. While I would be doing my work, I would just have YouTube playing in the background of all of these videos. So the Les Browns, the Jim Rohns, the Zig Ziglars, the Brian Tracys, T. Harv Eckerts, so that's all I was doing. And then the tipping point for me came maybe 2013 in February. I remember I went to this event by this company called Peak Potential, and it was a wealth creation seminar, entrepreneurship stuff. But I just remember going to that event and just feeling so empowered and enthralled that, I quit my job that Monday. That may not have been the best thing for me to do at that point in my life, but I'm still glad that I did it, because if I hadn't quit my job at that point, then I know that I would have got comfortable with that paycheck, and I wouldn't be where I'm at. I wouldn't be where I am today when it comes to understanding what I now know, specifically about billionaires and how they think, and what we can do to imitate that, so that we can increase the probability of us becoming successful entrepreneurs. So my thing per se wasn't to, again, not to be, what wasn't necessary to be a billionaire per se, but it was just to understand the billionaire mindset, like, and try to, and do my best to imitate that in my own life. Shoot for the stars. I'd at least hit the moon. That was my train of thought. You feel me? So that's what I did. So mind you, that was 2013 when I quit and really got on this self education journey. So from 2013 moving forward, well, it began prior to the 2013, but I would just say 2013 was at that tipping point. So once I had that tipping point where I quit, and then it was just pretty much I had to figure it out, and that was kind of like my thing, because I remember that whole story about Cortez coming to the New World and burning the boats. You know what I mean? I remember that vividly. You got to burn the boats, burn the boats. So in my mind, burning the boat mean I had to just get out there. So I literally jumped in the deep end, and I had to sink or swim. And it was hard treading in the beginning, and it took some time. But what I ended up start doing was, I just stayed down, I stayed disciplined, and I studied. And so again, I just was reading books and I was looking at YouTube videos, and that became my routine. But for years, like decades, you know what I'm saying? Because again, that's what I'm saying. I knew that I didn't know what I didn't know, but I also didn't know what I needed to know, and which means I didn't necessarily know the questions to ask. And it was a bunch, but I just knew that I had to figure this out. So literally, I kind of retracted from life in regards to having fun or chilling with the homies, parlaying, things of that nature, because it was like I need to figure this out. So that's what I did. I stopped and I figured it out. I put the time in. I dedicated myself. I wasn't entertaining fun time, friends, girlfriends, all that kind of stuff. Like, I literally cut it out of my life, because I said I have to figure this out. Like, And if it takes my whole lifetime, it takes my whole lifetime. But at least I'll be able to leave something back for future generations so they don't have to take a lifetime to figure this stuff out. And so that brings me now to like, what did I figure out? So what did I learn? And I learned a lot. And again, because I was studying billionaires, I was reading, listening to their interviews. I was reading their books. Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I was reading their biographies. Sam Walton. Like I was just immersing myself. J. Paul Getty. I was immersing myself in their materials so that I can try to get a better understanding of how they thought, beliefs that they had that allowed them to produce the outcome of becoming a billionaire. All right. So with that being said, here's what I learned. So I'm gonna just take everything, all these years of studying and sacrifice and burning the midnight oil. I have it down to three core elements. That's what I was able to distill it down to. So out of decades of learning and studying and researching, this is what I know now. Here are the top three core billionaire beliefs that when you imitate them, when you emulate them into your own personal life, you will begin to produce the results similar to what billionaires are able to produce. Not to say you're going to be and become a billionaire, but you will get a lot closer to it than if you don't start thinking like this. All right. So let's bust it down. So first I'll go ahead and read what the three things are, and then I'll go through each one of them. All right. So the first one, scale thinking. So that means you're playing in the billionaire arena. The next one is relentless execution and adaptability, meaning speed plus learning equals market domination. Last but not least, resource magnetism, which is mastering capital and people. When I first came to these three positions and I just thought about it, I was like, you know what, that makes perfect sense because when we look at billionaires, they are thinking at a level of thought that the average man and woman, even a millionaire, isn't thinking at. Even a multimillionaire isn't thinking that. So there is some scale thinking there, you know what I'm saying? There is some $1 billion arena that they think in. Then the next one, relentless execution and adaptability. Speed plus learning equal market domination. It was just like, yeah, that makes sense because we always hear Warren Buffett talking about, yeah, like I read like hours a day, and when you really listen to billionaires, they say that a lot. Like I read a lot, I read a lot, I read a lot. So they're learning a lot on a day-to-day basis. They read and learn a lot on a daily basis. That's for many of them. That's what they do primarily. A lot of them, they just learn all day. But again, they're learning what they're learning so that it improves their speed to market. And because they learn and they have the speed, they're able to dominate. Then last but not least, resource magnetism. So mastering capital and people. So capital being money, and then obviously people. The team that you need to build to help you scale, because it is very challenging for a human being to scale their labor because time is a finite resource. That we all only have 24 hours in a day, so there's only so many hours in a day that we'll be able to work before trading time for money becomes unsustainable. However, if we can figure out how to come up with an idea that generates income for us, then that could be scaled infinitely because creativity is an infinite resource. Now that we've gone through what the three core elements of the billionaire belief is, let's go ahead and talk about each one individually. So first up, scale thinking, playing in the $1 billion arena. What I learned now when it comes to scale thinking about these billionaires was they operate at a different level in terms of scale. Think of it like this. So billionaires, they're not thinking about small wins. If I was in the finance industry, you know what I'm saying? Like I want to help the people on my block become financially literate. That ain't how a billionaire thinks. No, a billionaire thinks, they think big. They want to solve massive problems or they want to serve massive markets. Someone who thinks like a billionaire thinks like, you know what? I want to help 30 million American households become financially literate. You feel me? Like that's the difference. So same intent, just different scale of thinking. The average individual, myself included, now I understand how small I was thinking. I thought I was thinking big, but no, I was thinking very, 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 very small. So now I understand that you got to think big thoughts. You got to be focused on big problems. You got to be focused on big markets. That's the $1 billion arena that billionaires think within. They don't think in small wins. They think in big wins. Elevate your level of winning. If you can't win here first, then you're not gonna win in reality. Go from thinking small wins to big wins and massive wins. Not even big wins, but massive wins. You feel me? So that's the difference. The average individual, even millionaires, they think small wins, whereas billionaires think massive wins. All right. Next, the billionaires, they're not focused on building a business that makes hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars when it comes to their thinking. They're thinking of, you know what, I need to build a system that generates billions of dollars. So that comes down to building platforms, utilizing technologies and building global brands. So when we look at a company like Apple, for example, they're like $1 trillion company, but their owners are billionaires. Or Steve Jobs, rest in peace, he was able to become a billionaire because again, they were focused on serving massive markets, solving massive problems, and then they were focused on building a system that generated billions by leveraging technology, platforms, and global branding. Like, then last but not least, what I'm saying, leverage. They focus on leverage. The average individual and millionaires, we have this idea where, me included, I thought all these years, what I'm saying, like, you got to do it yourself. I have to do it myself. Like, I have to figure it out on my own. I can't come out into the world and say that I have this value to give until I've produced this result or outcome on my own, whatever it was. But that's small-minded thinking at the end of the day, and that was me not understanding how a billionaire thought, because a billionaire don't think like that. A billionaire thinks like, okay, I have a vision. I'm going to solve a massive problem. I'm going to serve a massive market. I know I need to build a system to make this happen. So I need to leverage other people. I need to leverage other technologies. I need to leverage other capital, and I need to leverage other systems so that I can multiply my impact exponentially. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how the billionaire thinks about it. The billionaire ain't trying to just do it all by themselves as on an ego trip to prove something to him or herself. No, they understand leverage. You feel me? Like, they understand that I need people, tech, capital, and systems so that I can multiply my impact exponentially. Like, so again, billionaire math ain't based on addition, it's based on multiplication, exponential multiplication at that. So that's what you got to think. So to recap, billionaires don't think in small wins, they think in massive wins. Instead of, focus on building a business that makes millions, they focus on building systems that generates billions. And then they focus on leverage. So people, tech, capital, and systems. Period, point blank. So relentless execution and adaptability. So speed plus learning equals market domination. So billionaires, they move fast and they iterate fast. So iterate means, create their product concepts, prototype. So they launch, they test, and they pivot quickly. Billionaires fail fast. Like, that's what I'm learning. They fail fast. All right. So this failing fast ultimately is what allows them to get ahead of everybody else, because they're not worried about being perfect. The average individuals, because we so stuck in this, our schooling conditioning of you got to get A's, you're getting everything right. We get to thinking that we got to be perfect when it comes to entrepreneurship and business, but we don't. We got to be fast. Like, that's the that's the name of the game. So move fast and iterate fast. The next, it's just not about working hard, it's about working strategically. So doing what works and eliminating the inefficiencies at all costs. That boils down to you doing things like making sure that, again, you are focused on being strategic. So planning things out, having your visions, having your ideas, but not just going straight into execution, but no, taking some time to think these things through, plan them out. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the difference. You know what I mean? And then last but not least, this was a big one to me, because I was like, damn, like, I never looked at it like this. But billionaires view failure as data, and then they want to use the data to fine tune their approach so they can always be adapting to the market as it shifts. So again, we, as regular thinking, non-think billionaire thinking individuals, not having those beliefs, we're thinking, like, again, coming back from our school, failure is a bad thing, but it's just like, no, failure is not a bad thing. Failure is a good thing, because failure gives you data that you can then use to know what you need to be doing to move forward, to do it better the next time around. So when it comes to relentless execution and adaptability, again, speed plus learning equal market domination. Move fast and iterate fast. Prototyping. You want to work strategically, not just harder. And then, embrace failure as data. So use your losses, your failures as a learning lesson and as an opportunity to collect data so that you can figure out what you can do better the next time around. All right, last but not least, number 3, resource magnetism, and which is mastering capital and people. Billionaires understand that money follows vision and value. It's one thing I didn't understand when I was coming up. I was of the thought that like money goes to people who just get it. You gotta just know people. I wasn't thinking, that. You know what I'm saying? So have a strong vision. Investors invest not just in, the person, but they invest in the vision. Like that's what makes them want to invest in the person. So have a strong vision, have strong values, and stick to them. So that's how you develop what you need to develop in order to attract the investors, the partners, and the talent that you're going to need to turn your vision of solving massive problems into a reality. You're gonna need value. They're gonna need value and vision more than anything else. You know what I'm saying? Not necessarily a college degree or just knowing somebody, because even if you just know somebody, you still gonna need the values and the vision. All right. So that's very important, ladies and gentlemen. So don't overlook that step. You know what I mean? Like value and vision. Like that's really where it all begins. Value and vision. So don't take it for granted. Next, instead of doing everything themselves, they build powerful teams and they empower their teammates to do the work that needs to be done to turn the vision into a reality. Leverage. As you've heard multiple times here, leverage is the key. Billionaires is not trying to do things by themselves. You know what I mean? A good way of looking at this is I've heard this described as, would you rather have a grape to yourself or would you rather share a watermelon with your friends? So most of us, we want to eat that grape for ourselves. You know what I'm saying? So we rather earn 100% of a business that earns $100,000 a year, as opposed to earning 10% of a business that generates $10 million a year in profit. So what would you rather have? 100% of a business that generates $100,000 a year in profit, or 10% of a business that generates $10 million in profit. Like that's the difference between everyone else and a billionaire. The billionaire, they work with a team, they leverage the team. They don't try to do everything by themselves. They don't try to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. They master their one thing and then they build a team around them of people who can do everything else. So that's literally the difference maker as well. So don't try to do it by yourself. Build a team. Then last but not least, unshakable belief in their mission. This goes back to the value and vision aspect of it, because the more clarity you give yourself when it comes to value and vision, the more unshakable your belief will become. It's this unshakable belief in their mission, in their vision, that makes people want to buy into their mission and vision. That's what makes the investors, the partners, and the talent want to be down with them, because it's like, man, this person really believes in this. And again, when you talk to them, when you listen to their interviews, when you read their books, like that's one of the things a lot of billionaires typically say. Like, I just had this unshakable belief in myself, and I wasn't gonna let nothing stop me from moving forward. Like nothing. Like those are the 3 core elements of billionaire belief: scale thinking, relentless execution and adaptability, and resource magnetism. Like it took me a long time to figure that out. It took me a long time to distill all these years of information, knowledge, and learning into these 3 core concepts. But now you know them. You don't have to spend the time. So I've just steepened your learning curve, and hopefully you get value from that. So now all you gotta do is just think like a billionaire, because you have the core beliefs of a billionaire: scale thinking, relentless adaptability, resource magnetism. Like that's it. It is my intention that you take what you've learned here and apply it to your life in a day-to-day basis, so that you can increase the probability of you becoming a successful entrepreneur, because that's the only reason why we had this discussion right now, for you to help you become a successful entrepreneur, because that's what I was trying to become back then. You feel me? I just wanted to be a successful entrepreneur. I just didn't have a clear path to making it happen, and that clear path began with understanding the mindset that I needed to have in order to identify what that clear path was going to look like. So now that you have the mindset, the core pillars, the core elements of the billionaire belief, the billionaire mindset, the billionaire mentality, I challenge you to go off into the world and create. Go be the creator, the value creator that you've always been feeling confident that you were destined to be. Have that unshakable belief in that. Like that's your mission to help, to provide, to bring value to the marketplace, so that others don't have to, have the same mistakes and challenges that you had. That's why I'm doing it. If you have any questions, feel free, comment section, DM me, do what you got to do, reach out. I'm here to help. Peace.